Nikon announces development of the Z9 full-frame flagship camera. They finally did it. They're going to be releasing a flagship Z9 mirrorless camera. Let's talk about that in this video. What's up, y'all? It is your Project Photography, back in another video, and today, the Nikon Z9 was just announced as a development announcement a few days ago, and there's a lot of information that's been going around. So what I wanted to do in this video was kind of give you what's been rumored, what we know so far, and my opinions about the new camera based on the rumors and what we know. So it's going to be interesting in these next couple of months to see what Nikon does with the Z9. I'm very confident they're going to come out with an amazing camera, guns ablaze, because they really need to. This is going to be one of the most important cameras that they come out with in the past, I want to say 5 years. So hopefully Nikon does succeed with this camera, and yeah, let's jump right into the video about what we know about the Nikon Z9 so far. So first off, this is all information from Nikon rumors and from Nikon themselves. This information they told us about the Z9 so far. First off, we know for sure it's going to have a newly developed FX format stacked CMOS sensor, which means it's going to have faster readout, which will lead to better electronic frames per second shooting. Now, it's also going to have a new image processing engine. It's going to have support for 8K video recording. Now, this is really important piece of information so far, because with them telling us this, it kind of gives us a lead as to what the sensor megapixel size is going to be. Because 8K is around a 33 megapixel readout at a 16:9 aspect ratio, it should have a sensor that's around 45 to 50 megapixels, so that's pretty promising to hear. There's also going to be various other video specifications that they don't really mention, but they say, you know, there's going to be other video specifications. There's going to be integrated battery grip for sure, as you can see on the body itself. It's meant to replace and surpass the Nikon D6, which makes sense because the Nikon D6 was more of a marginal upgrade when it comes to the relative to the D5. It wasn't a huge upgrade like the D4 was to the D3 and the D5 was to the D4 and so on. So it makes sense that this camera is meant to go up and surpass those expectations. So on the body, on the top right, the controls are similar to likings of the Nikon D6, and on the bottom right, we can see that the AF selector mode is like the DSLRs. Now, one thing I do want to note on the top right hand corner of the Z9 is that it does have that little locking mechanism. So what I'm expecting to see here is you're changing whether you're going from fast frame per second to timer to, you know, single frame shooting, like that sort of stuff. I expect to see that on the top right hand corner because it has that locking mechanism. We're also going to see that the function buttons are similar to the D6. They're more circular than the type of function buttons on the Nikon Z6 and Z7 and so on. They also said that it's going to be released later this year. They don't tell us exactly when it's going to be released, but they said it's just going to be released later this year. So that's essentially what we know for sure. That's concrete, and that's what Nikon told us specifically. So just going based off of the specs that they told us right off the bat, we know this is going to be a high megapixel beast. It's going to be meant for professionals. It's going to be built like a tank, because that's just what Nikon is known for. They're known for cameras that just don't break, go through anything and absolutely everything. And I'm confident that this is going to be a camera meant for pros. It's going to be meant for those guys on the side of sports, on the side of photojournalism, and they're going to be there in those professional settings where they need the most rugged, secure bodies possible. I think this is going to be the camera for that. Let's talk about what's been rumored so far about the Nikon Z9. And clearly all of this is speculatory. None of it is set in stone. Nikon did not say any of this so far. This has just been tipped to Nikon rumors. So from here on out, this is all information that we don't know for sure. So first of all, they said that a newly developed hybrid resolution stacked FX sensor. That means that 3 different sensors were tested. They said a 45 to 46 megapixel sensor, 15 megapixel, and 16 megapixel sensors. All 3 of those were tested. Now, they're not going to come out with 3 versions of the Nikon Z9, obviously. That's just what they were testing when it comes to different types of sensors. The Nikon Z9 is expected to be released in the fall of 2021, which makes sense considering the timeline of when this development announcement was made, and just considering, you know, how long it might take to actually come out with an official announcement. The Nikon Z9 is described to be a D6 body combined with EOS R5 imaging, A9 II autofocus, and a blackout-free EVF. It's gonna have 20 frames per second shooting, multi-shot mode, 16-bit RAW. It's gonna have 8K 30 frames per second at 4K as well, with 120 frames per second, 60 frames per second, and 30 frames per second, all in 4K. It's gonna have a new X-Speed processor designed for 8K. Stunning autofocus tracking, better than the Nikon D6, like they said. That's gonna be pretty impressive to me. I mean, if they can match the D6 and exceed that, then that's gonna be really crucial because that camera has insane autofocus tracking. So I'd really like to see that in the Nikon Z9. It's gonna have 2 XQD cards / CF Express Type B memory card slots, have an ISO range from 64 to 25,600. It's going to have improved noise levels and significantly better dynamic range. It says it's going to have a high resolution blackout-free EVF, probably a 5.76 million dot EVF, 120 hertz refresh rate. They said that the resolution can be reduced in order to increase the refresh rate. It's gonna have a new user interface. There's gonna be no second LCD on the back, kind of like the D6. So that's gonna be interesting to see how they work that into the actual user face. There's going to be Gbit, LAN, USB Type-C, Wi-Fi, and GPS for all the people that need to transfer those images on the fly. And they said the price is going to be around $6,000 to $7,000. That's a lot of information, I know. Clearly, like I said, none of this is for sure in stone. This is just what's been rumored. But let's talk about the rumored specs as well as what we know for sure. So from the looks of it, from both the rumored and the known features and specs, it looks to be similar to the Sony A1 as well as the Canon EOS R5. Now that's gonna be really interesting because, you know, when it comes to choosing those cameras, like what's gonna really differentiate it for a lot of these pro photographers? And I feel like, I know this is gonna be really dumb to say, but I feel like that integrated battery grip is going to be the big differentiator for a lot of these pros. You know, a lot of them don't want to have to attach and detach those battery grips. They just want it in it. That's going to mean better weather sealing, more ruggedness, and just an overall better experience, especially for these pros. It's quite interesting because all these are essentially going to be the same camera if we go off the rumored and what's expected specs. They're all going to be looking like, you know, very similar cameras, just repackaged and redesigned to maybe fit their own camera brands. It's going to be really interesting to see what the Nikon Z9 differentiates from those. I believe that the 16-bit RAW is definitely going to be a big differentiator. If they can nail the autofocus and at least bring it to par with those two guys, that's going to be absolutely huge. For me, and what I do, the Nikon Z6 and Z50 and just the whole Z ecosystem, autofocus has been fine for me, but I know for a lot of pros, they've been harping on the autofocus. They're saying that, you know, we need better autofocus and so on. So if Nikon can deliver that, that's gonna be absolutely huge. And the implications for that is that if they can nail the autofocus at the top line, that's just gonna trickle down to their bottom lines. And that right there is gonna be absolutely crucial because we're going to get Z6 3s, Z7 3s, maybe a Z8 in the future with incredible autofocus. And at that point, I feel like Nikon's really able to catch up to their herd. Like I said, the Nikon flagship cameras, like the D6, the D5, D4, so on, those are the cameras that pros use on the daily basis. Those are the cameras that pros pick up. They take out to the Olympics, to professional sporting events, for photojournalism, to photograph maybe political stuff or just news that's going on every day. This is going to be that camera for them and in a mirrorless format. Hopefully it's going to be more lighter weight, better technology, and overall just make these people's lives easier as professionals. And I feel like, you know, what this camera might be signaling is that it's going to be the end of DSLRs in the near future. Now, I still believe they might come out with an updated version of the Nikon D850 as well as the D500. I can definitely see new iterations like that coming out. But it's really hard to see a new flagship DSLR coming out after the Z9. It's really hard to see something like a D7. Mirrorless is the future, that's for sure. That's what we know. And there's no saying for sure that they're going to continue with the DSLRs, even though DSLRs do make up a big portion of this market. We're speaking more into the future and in line with that. And it's just really hard to see another flagship SLR coming out to replace the likes of the D6. The Z9 seems to be that tipping point where they're saying, you know what, we're really jumping into mirrorless full on. And I think it's going to be a big turning point for Nikon. I really hope that, you know, they come out strong, swinging for the fences, and come out with a camera that stuns everybody. They really can't hold back because I feel like a lot of the photography community is not necessarily happy with the way Nikon is going. For me personally, I don't really care about the opinions of that because, you know, the Nikon Z6 and the Z50 have done amazing for me. They create amazing images, but I feel like the general consensus around Nikon has been just that they're not producing, they're not innovating, and so on. And you know what? Even though that's the opinion of a lot of these people in the photography community, that kind of trickles down to how other people think as well and definitely influences that. So if Nikon can change their narrative, change how people talk about them, I think it'll be a huge stepping stone for them in the future. Now, when it comes to specs from other camera manufacturers and from Nikon, it seems like from this point on, specs are just gonna get more and more ridiculous. I mean, in what situation would you need more than 20 frames per second? Yeah, the Sony A1 shoots 30 frames per second, but like, how much of a benefit does that really get you? That's really nitpicking. And at this point, I can just see specs going from 8K video to 12K video, even though we don't even need 8K in the first place. There's just going to be some ridiculous stuff coming out, and it's really interesting to see where the camera industry is going to go from this point on, because I feel like, at least, that specs are going to get to a point where the individual specs of a camera doesn't even matter anymore. Any camera manufacturer can create amazing images and have incredible specs. Like, for example, how do you differentiate between the Canon EOS R5 and the Sony A1? Now, there's little nitpicking things you can differentiate between the Sony A1 and the R5, but they're essentially the same camera, just packaged for different different brands. That's really what it is, and it's going to be really interesting to see, you know, where do we go from here in terms of specs, in terms of how these companies are going to differentiate themselves. It's all good to me. I feel like it's going to come down to marketing. It's going to come down to how they sell themselves, and it's really going to come down to who has the better lenses. I feel like lenses might be the biggest differentiator if all these companies can create cameras with incredible specs. So it's gonna be really interesting to see. It's gonna be a very even playing field across the board, and specs aren't going to be as big of a deal as I feel like they once were. Technology grows on an exponential curve, as I'm sure a lot of you know, and we're really hitting that point where things are just going to shoot up to the point where things are just going to get kind of ridiculous. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen. I'm really excited for the Nikon Z9. Now, for me personally, would I buy one? It's hard to say, because I am happy about the fact that they have the integrated battery grip. Like, don't get me wrong, but for landscape photography, I mean, it's hard to justify a camera like that for landscape photography when something like the Z7 is out there. It's just, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, it is really expensive. For me personally, I'd rather, because I actually do a lot of baseball photography. If you guys didn't know, that's one of my favorite types of photography. But for baseball, I feel like, you know, this would be great to have, but is it necessary? I don't think it is, especially for that kind of price tag. I feel like there's other cheaper options like the Nikon D500. A used one can run around like $900 or so. And compared to 6 to 7 grand for a Nikon Z9, I don't know. This is a camera definitely for the professional photographer, and I love how they have the integrated battery grip. I think it just makes the camera much more professional, much more rugged. It's gonna be an overall better system. So yeah, guys, that's kind of my thoughts and opinions about this. What we know, what's been rumored, all that good stuff. So let me know what you guys think of it down in the comment section down below. What are your opinions of this camera, of the specs, and what we know so far? For me personally, very excited. I hope that Nikon really just blows everyone out of the water with this. I think this is a really important camera for them, and they really need to hit this one on the nail. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. I also am selling my photo prints down in the description bar below as well. So let me know what you guys think about that. Anyways, guys, rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.